You know, it's funny, Mark said, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the old library. I never thought I'd be here, searching for a book that could be the key to saving our world. What's so funny about that, Jenna replied, her eyes scanning the dusty spines of the books around her. You're the one who loves history and old stuff. This should be right up your alley. It's just, well, it's a bit like playing hide and seek with destiny, isn't it? Mark chuckled, running his fingers along the ancient texts. And I've never been good at finding things. The air had dust and the scent of aged paper. The only sound was their footsteps on the creaking wooden floor and the occasional sigh of a page being turned. They had been searching for hours, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like the heavy tomes they shifted from shelf to table. The library was a relic from a different time, a place where knowledge had once been sacred and sought after. Now it was a tomb of forgotten lore, a silent witness to the march of progress that had left it behind. Mark and Jenna felt like intruders, disturbing the peace of the books that had slumbered for decades. As they moved deeper into the shadows, the light from their flashlights danced across the cobweb-covered ceiling, casting eerie shadows on the floor. They had heard stories about this place, whispers of strange occurrences and unexplained sounds, but they had dismissed them as the imaginings of overactive minds. Now, as the darkness closed in, they weren't so sure. Jenna stumbled upon a section of books that seemed out of place, a small collection of leather-bound volumes that looked as if they belonged in a museum rather than a forgotten library. Mark, check these out. She called, her excitement palpable, despite the creeping sense of unease that was slowly taking hold. He joined her, and together they knelt before the books. The leather was cool to the touch, the gold lettering on their spines shimmering in the dim light. Mark carefully pulled one out and opened it. The pages were brittle, the ink faded but legible. The title read Chronicles of the Forsaken. The room grew colder, and a sudden gust of wind blew out their flashlights. They were plunged into darkness, the kind that seemed to have substance, a living, breathing presence that enveloped them like a shroud. What was that? Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible above the racing beat of their hearts. Mark fumbled in his pocket for the matches they'd brought, striking one with trembling hands. The flickering flame illuminated their faces, etching fear into the lines around their eyes. They could hear the rustle of pages, as if the books were whispering to each other in the dark. The flame danced as if alive, casting shadows that seemed to stretch out from the bookshelves like ghostly fingers reaching for them. As the match burned down, Mark quickly lit another, passing it to Jenna so he could replace the flashlight batteries. The brief glimpse of light revealed that the books around them had shifted, the leather-bound volumes now closer, almost menacing. The air grew thick with the scent of something ancient and malevolent, a smell that clung to their clothes and filled their lungs with dread. When the flashlight finally flickered back to life, they saw that the books had formed a circle around them, the titles of the one Mark held standing out like a beacon in the sea of darkness. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to be speaking in an unknown language, yet somehow they understood the urgency, the warning it conveyed. The pages of the Chronicles of the Forsaken began to turn by themselves, the wind that had extinguished their light now flipping through the book with a will of its own. They watched, transfixed, as the pages stopped at an illustration so disturbing it seemed to pulse with evil. A creature with too many eyes and a mouth full of jagged teeth stared back at them, the lines of the drawing appearing to shift and writhe, as if alive. The whispers grew into a cacophony, the wind howling through the library like the wail of 1,000 lost souls. The book slammed shut with a thud that echoed through the room, and the temperature dropped further. Mark and Jenna knew they had found more than just a book. They had disturbed something that had slumbered for a very long time. The whispers grew into a chant, the words of the ancient language becoming clearer with each repetition. It was a summoning, a call to something that should never be brought forth. They had to get out, but the books had formed a wall, blocking their path. Panic set in, as they realized they were not alone. Their breaths came in short gasps, their palms slick with cold sweat. Mark's hand shook as he tried to keep the flashlight steady, the beam of light bobbing around the room, like a lost lighthouse beam. The whispers grew into a crescendo, the pressure in their ears becoming almost unbearable. And then, from the corner of his eye, Mark saw a movement. The shadow grew larger, taking on the shape of the creature from the book. It was no longer confined to the page, but was now a terrifying reality that stood before them, its eyes gleaming with malicious intent. The flashlight flickered and died, plunging them into darkness once more. Their hearts hammered in their chests as they felt the creature's breath, hot and foul, on their faces. Mark's hand fumbled for the book, his mind racing with the desperate hope that it might offer some protection or insight into how to banish the monster. But as his fingers brushed the leather, a sudden jolt of pain shot through him, and the book was torn from his grasp. The creature's laugh echoed through the library, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the laugh of something that knew it had the upper hand, something that reveled in the fear it inspired. Mark and Jenna were trapped, and the darkness was now their prison. Jenna's voice was steady despite the horror that surrounded them. "We have to get out of here," she said, her hand reaching for Mark's. "We can't let it win." "I know," Mark replied, his own voice trembling slightly. "But how?" The books. Their eyes had adjusted slightly to the gloom, and they could see the faint outlines of the shelves, the towering sentinels that had become their prison walls. They felt their way along the cold metal, searching for any sign of an exit. But the books had moved again, sealing them in. "It's playing with us," Jenna murmured, her voice tight with fear. "We're like mice in a maze." As if in response to her words, the shelves began to shift, the books grinding together in a deafening cacophony. The creature's laugh grew louder, closer. The floor beneath them trembled, as if something massive approached. The air grew colder still, and Mark felt a presence beside him, so close he could almost feel the heat of its breath. He clutched the flashlight, now nothing but a useless lump of plastic in his hand. Jenna's grip on his arm tightened until he thought she might break the skin. And then, a spark of light. A single flame flickered to life in the distance, casting a feeble glow on the path ahead. There, Mark said, pointing with a trembling finger. "We have to get to that light." They stumbled forward, the shelves moving around them like living things, trying to trip them up. The creature's laughter grew fainter as they approached the light, replaced by a guttural growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the library. The flame grew brighter, beckoning them onward. As they reached the light, they saw that it was emanating from a single candle, placed atop a podium. The book they had been searching for lay open before it, the pages fluttering in the breeze that had followed them in. The creature's silhouette loomed large behind them, its eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The book," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's the key." Jenna nodded, her eyes wide with determination. They had to find a way to use it, to send the creature back to whatever hell it had come from. The candle's light grew stronger, pushing back the darkness, and they could see the words on the page. The incantation was ancient, written in a language that seemed to burn itself into their brains as they read aloud. The creature roared in anger, the sound rattling the windows and sending dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. The books around them began to fly off the shelves, hurling themselves at the creature in a storm of paper and leather. Mark and Jenna ducked and weaved, their eyes never leaving the page. The final word was spoken, and the air crackled with power. The creature screamed, a sound that seemed to rip through the fabric of reality itself. The floor opened up beneath it, a yawning chasm that swallowed it whole. The books fell still, their whispers silenced as the light grew brighter. They watched in awe as the creature disappeared into the abyss, the candle's flame growing dimmer as the library slowly returned to its former state of quiet decay. They were safe, for now. But the book remained open, the pages fluttering gently, a reminder of the power they had unleashed and the responsibility they now bore. They stepped back from the podium, their hearts still racing. The candle flickered and went out, leaving them once again in darkness. But this time it was a darkness filled with the promise of escape. They found their way back to the stairs, the books no longer barring their path. The door swung open with a groan, and they stepped out into the night, the cold air feeling like a balm against their heated skin. They didn't speak as they walked away from the library, the silence between them a testament to the terror they had just faced. But as they turned to look back, they saw the faintest glow from the windows, a hint that the books within were not as dormant as they had once believed. Their mission had only just begun.